Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sheikhna, thank you very much for giving us so much of your precious time again. I know we've had long conversations, and while this is the third and the final in the series of the Sufi Encounters, I'm sure and I hope that we will continue more conversation on other aspects. Sheikhna, I've received a lot of feedback on our previous conversations. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And one of the recurring themes is about the origins of, what we term Sufism, because there are, what they say, there are questions that other parts of the Muslim world attached to this concept. But you actually, it's very interesting what you wrote in your book, and I just quote a piece from your book when you quote Abu Bakr al-Kalabadi, and he says that the Sufis existed at the time of the Prophet. They're the actual original Muslims. These were deposited by God amongst his creation and chosen out of those whom God made. They were the people of his bench. And then you go on to say that, all this goes back to Imam Ali mostly, other than the Naqshbandis. So could you dwell a little bit on that so there's clarity on who are the Sufis? Bismillah.
In any household where there are few children, you find different orientation amongst the children. One or two of them are more practically oriented, one or two are more adventure oriented, one or two are more, reflective, contemplative, inward, quiet. So every human being, every mature human being will have a tendency towards either action or towards reflection and knowledge or towards serving and helping. So these tendencies are within us. And also, I'm sure at the time of the Prophet, we can never be certain, but we can imagine it, that there will be people amongst them. Some of them want to constantly go and defend and do jihad or whatever. Others would like to serve, and others would like to be quiet in the fields, or peasants, or just have animals to look after. So these are different tendencies. The Sufis were those who were more interested in the inner meaning and the inner light and transformation by the deen, rather than just a lot of rituals and a lot of, to do with outer manifestations of worship. So I'm sure there were, like, as I said, every household would have this tendency. Take any 40 people who are even friendly and together, you find there are different tendencies within them. So it is that the people who are really serious about the meaning of life, the origin of life, the destiny in life. So what can we do in order to act as, humanely as possible, as generously as possible, without having constant fear and anxiety about outcome or about, all of the other things that goes with every action, especially with, reflection on errors and guilt. So we are all, in essence, have within us that, if you like, spark of what you may call Sufi, or light-oriented, or divinely oriented. We want to know for sure that there is that core of perfection that governs the universe. It's no use just having an idea or a faith or a belief until it becomes an actual reality for you, that Allah knows. As the Quran says, أَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَرَى. Don't you know that Allah sees everything, knows everything? Once you know that, then there is no hiding. Then there is no anxiety about what do the others think. Allah is seeing you. So why can't you be as normal, as natural, and trust in the rest? So the same thing with many, many other religions. They had people who were more interested in the inner, others more in the propagating, others and others. So this is the original idea of Sufism, especially when governments and kings took over the mantle, if you like, of representation, if you like, of God as a Khalif. So there will bound to be people who see this person who is in every way a very low level human being pretending to be representative. So they either have to or have to leave or have to be quiet and turn inward and call themselves something that is not a threat to the government of the day and so on. So it's a natural tendency, actually. I think it exists in most world religions. There were always people who were much more concerned about the inner meaning and light rather than the structure of the worship situation and the place and so on. So it's natural.
Marshall, Shekna, that I think is an absolute clear manifestation. It's not a cult. It's just a way of looking at life, and people are looking inner. And you know, I had this quote from Imam Ali, which you've quoted in your book, just come out, and it says, "Your remedy is within you, but you do not sense it. Your sickness is within you, but you do not perceive it. You presume you are a small entity, whereas within you is concealed the vast world. You are indeed the magnificent book by whose alphabet the hidden becomes evident. Therefore, you have no needs beyond yourself. Your essence and the secrets are in you."
Here, if it is Imam Ali or whoever, it implies that you have benefited from others, you have been helped by others, you have been helpful to others, and now you're discovering the microcosm in you. So
Wow.
wonderful. Yeah, it is. That's what it is. The microcosm. That is why if you kill someone by, without the necessary, if you like, correct justice system, then it is as though you have killed the whole of creation. Everyone carries the light of God in their heart. So without being, unless you are totally respectful and in reverence of the inner light, you won't be able to really respect them and help them and be, if you like, just as well. We owe it to ourselves to realize there is the divine light in, but also there is an outer creature which has evolved from earliest billions of years ago, a cell, into all the other animals until the Homo sapiens and the rise of the Adamic consciousness of maybe whatever 100,000 years ago, that consciousness of consciousness of consciousness. So you have a reflection within reflection.
Wow.
And therefore, whatever you do has been in a way referenced and evaluated. Is it the right time, the right place, the right people? Otherwise, silence. We are too noisy. In the last 2-3 decades, our noise had also become visible, physical, material. We're polluted everywhere, up, down, sideways, in the oceans. We're almost bringing upon ourselves the extinction. So all by supposedly goodwill or certain ease or development or
Sheikh, hmm, hmm. Thank you. Sheikh, I'm just going to change tack a little and get down to the everyday worries and anxieties and desires and struggles and people undergo. And in your book, you quote something very beautifully. Just want to quote a little piece and then ask your to dwell on it. You say worries and anxieties relate to past losses or future uncertainties. Thus, grief and concern relate to pleasures and pain when he is witnessed as the essence and cause behind all situations, and one is content with his grace, then spiritual vision in opened. In this state, sadness and afflictions become purifiers of the heart and cause of higher insights regarding his presence.
Mhm. That's very good. Thank you.
So you're saying that everything is from him, and if we understand that, then they become the purifiers of the heart and give us strength to deal with them.
Well, you can say everything is from her or everything's, there is only Allah.
There's only Allah.
Truth is equivalent to the divine light, the essence, or God, or any other name you like to give it. But that's because it's permanent. It belongs to another zone, which you may term as a quantum field. It's not based on space and time. It's absolute, ever present, everywhere, at no time and in every time, because it's beyond time. Now, so in my personal experience as a human, we all have expectations. We all have fear and hope. And that is where anxiety comes. When fear and hope get mixed up, when what I want to attract and what I want to repulse get mixed up, that becomes anxiety. So I don't know where to turn. I don't know the boundaries. I don't know where the lines that separate, the need to do something and the need not to do anything get mixed up. Now, what I want to share with you is the perfection. And I give you a very simple example. I had an expectation that this afternoon is going to be very pleasant. I've got myself geared up to go for a long walk and this and that and so on. As I'm about to do it, suddenly it starts pouring.
Sheikh, now we've got a bit of an audio problem. I can't hear you.
In every situation, I wanted to go out in sunshine, pleasant, dry weather, and so on. This was my expectation. And it is not to be met. Rain is pouring down now. My immediate response, of course, is to judge it. And I'm not too happy with that. Fine. The next thing is for me to stop my mind, clear the mind out of this judgment, and then witness it. See how much rain was needed, how much, it may not be here, maybe next door, maybe for the other. So if you stop your judgment because you have been a party to a certain direction which has been, in a way, stopped, then now see it for what it is. You find perfection. So there's perfection in my judging it because I wanted to have a continuity for the walk or whatever. And then there is perfection in the overall situation, in the environment, in the weather, and everything. So it's perfection upon perfection. We are here in order to witness all of that through subtle inner, if you like, understanding and observing. So, but we don't do that. We are always preoccupied with our rush for an outcome. And then comes the next project, another outcome, another challenge, another difficulty. And we end up being where we are, full of anxiety, full of uncertainty. And the whole world is choking with the excesses of the human pressure. And whether it can be in any way modified or not, nobody's hand. All of us are entering into a new zone globally of uncertainty. So the only way to cope is flexibility and doing one's best and trusting in the rest.
Wow.
So the idea of trust is not easy because the parents were not trustworthy, the society, whatever, everywhere you want, everybody's to themselves. So you haven't learned to trust in the unseen. So that is why we are bereft and our anxieties will become more complex.
Sheikh, this really is something that were also questions that people ask me, and I think there's some there's a lot of clarity that you're getting when you talk about the stillness of the heart and the contemplation to become aware and to witness things as they are without judging, without an opinion, without offering a qualifier. I think the question that perhaps is behind people's questions is, how do you still the heart so you're made aware and you can contemplate? How do you do that with all the noise that comes in surrounding us?
You know, as the couplets of you read of Imam Ali said, the medicine comes within you. So we're living at an age of a lot of uh, intense, also, if you like, um, stresses and difficulties. So that's why we also have hundreds of different techniques.
Hmm.
Everywhere you go, there is some sort of a yoga teaching, some sort of a way of ability to reflect and quieten the head and focusing and all of that. So every age has its own peculiar sicknesses as well as the remedies. So I think you have to learn from outside through whatever it takes you. There are hundreds of different channels that can lead to a less of the agitation and the stresses and anxiety. Sports, walks, any other outdoor, indoor, all kinds of exercise. So you have to learn to get to the point of stillness. And that comes also with additional outer or environmental, if you like, helps. Your diet, your habits of eating, drinking, smoking, all of these things have an impact. Willingness to be totally still, concentrating on your breath, and on and on and on until you touch the zone of pure consciousness in you. So the issue of the heart, which is metaphorical, this is
Hmm.
not the heart that pumps blood into your body, but it is a metaphor of that. There are two in every situation, twos. There are also twos of me. One is the biological evolved entity, and that started in one cell a few billion years ago, ended up with me as an animal on two legs, with a very, very sophisticated mind that can have a lot of creativity and can bring about also a lot of difficulties and anxieties. Now, the two is one to do with the higher light of lights, which is the source of life in me. And that what metaphorically we call in the heart. So your soul or your spirit is within that heart. Then there is the mind. The mind is the most amazing, intricate instrument that mediates between the infinite, the soul or the spirit, and the finite, which is the physical, material, mental me on earth.
Wow.
So the mind is necessary for the soul or the spirit to deal with an earthly space and 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 time-based atmosphere. So the mind is necessary for me to be a human being. And the heart is where the source of divinity or infinitude lies. I am both. The idea of middle people, as the Quran says, as the Buddhists, as many other great unveilings say, you are middle in the between the infinite unseen and the finite birth and death. So each one of us is the same. Now, I need to relate the two together. I am an animal that has to eat and rest and so on, and is born and will die. And within me lies a light that is beyond comings and goings and changes in space and time. It's eternal. So the real me is an eternal light. The so-called me is biologically, physiologically, culturally also connected with many others, and there is the so-called biography of me. I have to reconcile these two because they are, in actual fact, not separate at all.
Mm.
Same thing as the absolute and the relative. They're
Mm.
not separate. They're
Mm.
seamlessly connected.
Wow.
Each belongs to a different zone. The zone of space and time is the zone of change, and every instant it's different from the previous one, yet there is a similarity with the previous one.
Wow.
So we are in a process as human beings, moving from the infinite unknown via a stage in life which we call my biography or my birth and death, my life, back into the infinite again zone, having now been exposed, the soul or the spirit have been exposed to boundless, countless dualities, multiplicities, pluralities, good, bad, up, down, acceptable, awake, sleep, and so on.
Mm.
So it's a journey of the soul. The
Mm.
soul of the spirit, which is absolute and divine, has been exposed to these earthly dualities as it goes back again to its zone of higher energy, not incumbent by the limitations of the body or the mind or the environment and all of the other things that we try to get out of. So therefore, it's natural for an intelligent human being to try and push the boundaries. The
Mm.
children all the time push the boundaries that the parents impose.
Mm.
Due to the light of the soul within their heart, the soul has no boundaries. So the nafs, which is the ego self, the human side, has to maintain boundaries. Otherwise, we end up in the global chaos we are in.
Mm.
Everybody says it's not for me, it's for
Mm.
the others. I make my own rules, I make my own laws. Everybody wants to be the king that can rule over everything. Everybody wants to play God. That is why there is utter chaos. And it will not in any way abate until individuals, by choice, say, no, thank you. I want to know where I stop. Otherwise, this chaos gives me such anxiety that, I have to be under medication, which will going to destroy me anyway. So this is the situation we are in now, globally.
Mm. This.
Stress, uncertainty, anxiety, lies within lies within lies, blame and claim endlessly. That's why nobody is relaxed. Nobody can enjoy the moment. Nobody can have real, serious fun that is not subject to an immediate little pleasure, which can only come also with pain.
Mm.
That's the issue.
Mm. Mm. Wow, it's Shekhna, the bounded and the boundless, and if the nafs is not bounded, it can go berserk, chaos, like you mentioned. Subhanallah. Shekhna, on this issue of stilling the mind and the stillness, you quote the Prophet in your book, and specifically, uh, the zikr, which a lot of people of reflection do. And you say, the Prophet said, if you find the meadows of paradise, linger there. And he was asked, what are the meadows of paradise? And his reply was, as you quote, gatherings in remembrance of Allah. So could you dwell a little on the zikr that people do? Because uh, there is a belief that it becomes more ritualistic sometimes and not as deeply reflective for the inner soul. But obviously, it is a method to go deep inside.
See, again, we are living at an age where a lot of the luxuries, spiritual luxuries of the past,
Mm,
hardly exist.
mm.
So if you find any of these meadows, please let me know because I want to come too. So it becomes a romantic notion
I
and
know.
some idealistic thing, and you'll find more and more having the garb of true seekers,
Mm,
having the language of seekers, but without the reality and transformation that seeking genuinely, honestly will bring about.
yeah.
So we are going collectively, globally, through a very dark period in terms of the, if you like, the spiritual joys and insights. So these are some of the dangers of going to the past and to the early teachings and so on. I'm sure at that time, in those cultures, in those situations, these were real. But in our time, as I said, if you find any of such meadow, please let me know. But don't tell others because they will ruin it.
They do. I do. Personally, I I follow a certain ritual to still the mind, and it works. You have given me zikrs, you've shared a lot of your insights. I have had the great honor and privilege and very humbled, but they do work even in this modern day and age. If you are doing something that is a physical activity and a mental activity, it does still the mind, it does make you aware, it does stop you from judging and viewing the world.
But for that, you need belief. The
Yes.
British Empire was founded and was sustained by, at the peak, no more than 1 million British people, including all their armed forces and all of the all of them, no more than 1 million.
Sheikhna,
In 1905, there were only 1 million people of Britain engaged in ruling over, governing several hundred millions in India and elsewhere. Belief. They really believe that they are able to do it. They believe they will get the backup if needed later on, maybe after a year or two, and they will quell any rebellion. They believe. So in your case, you believed that this way of stilling your mind works. Brilliant. But you will find less and less people believing, because they had what sort of parenting, what sort of an environment they were. Most of it is unreliable, most of it is insecure, most of it is, so everybody ends up being selfishly, constantly concerned about their own little pleasures. So you have to bear in mind the circumstances we are in now. There are nearly 8 billion people. What they have, who did they have in their household as part of an extended family, trusting, loving, unconditionally, knowing that this world and the next world after death are seamlessly connected? Where is it? Where do they get it from? It doesn't exist. It's rare, rare, rare now. So you have benefited because you believe that this exercise helps you. But you'll find less and less people believing in anything. It's all shattered. The mind is in a mess. The heart is bleak and in darkness. So it's not just a pessimistic view. This is realism. You may find every now and then, to one's surprise, someone who is really still pure at heart and able to think clearly and are not concerned about their immediate provision. So it still exists, but rare.
That Shekhar, really, this comes down to that very fundamental question, construct, which is belief and faith and tawakkul and unquestioning and unqualified, which gives rise to then anything further. So if that basic construct is not there, nothing can help an individual.
Correct. Yeah, and the individuals can be also, there are always exceptions. There have always been individuals throughout human history who did not hear or know a prophetic model or a prophetic sketch of life. There are always exceptions, but they are the exceptions, you see. In the Islamic culture also, we have the Awaisis. So any Muslim who doesn't want to take a teacher or considers himself as a greater than every teacher, often you find they call themselves Awaisi.
Really?
I don't need a teacher.
So the Oasis are people who say, I don't need a teacher, I've got it.
Well, no, I mean originally because there was Awais al-Qarani in Yemen. And he was a being who was awakened and enlightened. And at the time of the Prophet, he said, look, he already has been, he's one of those beings. Go and visit him and greet him and love him and so on. And later on, there were a few tariqas called Awaisiyya. So, but human mind is very clever. So we can be very exceptionally clever and very devious.
To Sheikh, but on this particular subject, how are these people? How were these people enlightened? Where did, if they didn't have a model, they didn't have a prophetic model, where did they get this enlightenment? How did that happen?
I asked this question for quite a number of years, and I share with you a most wonderful event. I was eventually led to uh, Hyderabad, Dhaka. No, it's Hyderabad, Pakistan,
Yes.
and to the there had been paths in the old civilizations there, Mohenjo-daro and elsewhere, that I knew they were enlightened being without a prophet.
Hmm.
I was curious about that.
Hmm.
Eventually, I came across a man who had done a study of that in the Sindh.
Is this
And
Kalandri Baba,
it took me a
Sheikh?
few days, huh?
Is this Kalandri Baba?
No, no, no.
Okay.
He was actually much more concerned with the university and with teaching
Mhm.
and not known in the circle of so-called mystics or Sufis.
Okay.
But he pointed out to me to one ayah, and the ayah uses the word of the heart being receptive to the light.
Wow, wow, wow.
So it is ikhbat, khabat. It is the heart when it is still, trusting, pure, had no fear, have no anxiety, have nothing in it other than the original light in the heart, which is the soul. That is where it will do it. So every human being has a potential of receiving aspects of this wahi. The Quran says, and we made wahi for the bees, how to build their nest.
Wow, wow,
It says, he uses exactly the word wahi, or hayna, للنحل. So, but it takes a reception like, like a dog here hears far, far more than I do what's going on 3 or 4 kilometers away, and on and on. So there is the faculty of receiving the signal.
wow.
But when my heart is full of fear, anxiety, and doesn't receive any signal. Now we need to practice the mind to be still. We need to practice the heart to have no anger, no rancor, no hatred, no jealousy, so that the ruh, which is in there, radiates. So this is a very rare situation to have somebody who hasn't got fear and anxiety, and it's a battlefield outside now for survival. We are talking about the presence of total, constant arrival, perpetuity of now. It's rare, but
Mm,
it potentially is there. Is there.
mm, mm. And Shikha, this then, leading on from here, and you've talked about the chaos in the world, and you've talked about this massive display of greed and boundless desire to accumulate. In this world, people who are weak, and I say relatively weak in terms of the social structures, and who are exploited, and who are poor, and who do not have the wherewithal and means to save themselves from the onslaught of society. I mean, how do they seek this enlightenment while they're constantly struggling just really to breathe?
Well, I'm not one of them, so I can't tell you.
Uh,
No, it is a result of the nafs, the lower self, the ego self, the animal self, wanting to have the state and the condition of the soul or spirit itself, which has no insecurity, no
uh-huh.
anxiety, no fear, no sorrow, and all of that. And it's impossible. That's why we end up being abusive. And no matter how much wealth an individual has, is not enough to give that true, complete security. That is a spiritual issue. Outwardly, you need something on you, some shelter, some clothes, some food, but ultimately it's a spiritual crisis.
Mm.
So the whole world is going through a spiritual crisis which affects everyone. Now, it takes time for this suffering and for the anxiety and the illusion that we can fix it by power and wealth and force. Bigger army, bigger air force, bigger whatever aircraft carriers, bigger and more. And eventually for what?
Mm.
If there is going to be a group of people who have no concern about privacy, who all what they want is basic life, and they are celebrating contentment, joyful with having not excess, much, not enough for next month. That's enough for a few more days and enough, and enjoy it. And if there is less, you have less. If there is more, you share and you care and you give. If there is a group of people like that, send for them 10,000 atomic bombers and they won't be scared. They say, well, when we die, we are going back to where we have been, which is the infinite perfection without the body and the mind as incumbences. So how are we going to attack them? That's why most of the current day issues based on warfare won't reach anywhere, because you want eventually to win the minds and hearts. And minds and hearts have their ways. It is not a question of having somebody starving for a few days and they cry for help. It has another ecology. It doesn't change. So I think we are getting into a darker and darker global situation because we individually have been darker and darker. So I don't know how it will pan out, but I'm sure it will. It may be after an extinction also. I don't know. But right now, we're heading towards winter. So if we don't read it, then we are foolish. We think, no, business as usual. What is unusual? 5% of the world population have been consuming 90% of the consumables. If this balance, it can't be. So nature will do it, see. Or, as I said, the tiny little earth of ours will succumb. And there are billions of, stars and billions of galaxies. So what doesn't matter. The only thing is for us to be honest. If you're honest, then you discover that the so-called you is only an outer manifestation or a shadow of the real you, which is a perpetual divine light in your own heart. And that's it. There's nothing much more than that.
Shaykh, this is, there's this wonderful thread that runs through your entire conversation, and which is reflective of what one actually, from my understanding of the Quran, that it's really an individual journey for each one of us. I mean, and each one of us has to follow a path that they seem to have discovered towards that light. So what you're saying is that there will be a group of people, and there are a group of people who have discovered this inner peace, enlightenment. They are not fearful of anything. They do not have any anxieties. And these are the people that we must seek out in this world.
Yeah, now nothing exists ever except in dualities and pluralities. So and the microcosm I or the microcosm you cannot even survive without a macrocosm. But it doesn't mean people whom we are familiar with, or people of the same language, or the same culture, or the same religion even. So when the Quran also talks about the groups of people, in the hereafter, coming back again together, whatever, it doesn't mean people of the same culture or religion or background. You never know. There are people the other end of the world who are as aware, maybe, or as living the moment in its intensity as anybody else we know. So there are always people around who have more, awakened to a great extent to the reality and the truth of the eternal soul. So there will be. And the more of them, the better will be the quality of life on Earth, the quality of the ecology, and everything else as well. But at the moment, as I said, we've been for the last 200-300 years, having been in every way encouraged by our geniuses, if you like, of revolutions, whether it's industrial, whether agricultural, whether it is social, and that created an explosion of population and expectations. So now the expectations are coming to a point where we know it cannot be sustained. Whether it is any measure you take, it is not sustainable. Now, how is it going to pan out? We don't know. But here I come to your earlier point. I must take care of my own situation without denying the next door, without denying my immediate people near me, without imposing on them either. You know, so one has to be honest and honest and honest, responsible at all times, and you will come into the living and the moment, in the now, intensely and most joyful.
MashaAllah. This is these are, I think, the big message here, which I've heard from you often, is really about the universality of this oneness that we talk about. And it is not the preserve of any one religion or any one belief system. It existed before time, and it will exist beyond time, forever and ever and ever. So I think that is a message that our viewers probably will need to understand. But I'm going to put on my quantum physics hat, and you say if anyone says he understands quantum physics, he's lying. So I will ask you a question, because we've mentioned the infiniteness of the known universe, and the 73% dark energy and this dark matter, and the known universe we see comprises only 4% of what we can see. Will we, as humankind, as Homo sapiens, do you think we'll be able to eventually understand everything about this creation while we're here?
We already understand it, but it's been covered up with the mind.
Aha.
The light of the soul is universal and cosmic, and it is in every soul.
Aha.
Every soul is the same, but it is the filtering and the covering that makes the being into a criminal, makes the individual into totally hopeless, useless, dreadful, selfish misery, and so on. So the light is the same. It is the numerous different conditioning of the shadows. So it is the layer upon layer upon layer, one of this genetic, subgenetic, and on, then cultural, and then all of the other things that makes up the peculiar individuals. Now, so the answer to your question is that universality is already there, but we have to accept locality, deal with it, enjoy it, and move to universality. So you find the seamless connectedness between the locality and universality. One of the reasons that most Muslims suffer from nowadays is that they stayed with the very limited locality issue. And they're all the time going back in time. What happened 1400 years ago? What happened 1,000 years ago? But it may have been good or bad at that time. How relevant is it to our present day is the issue. Many of the things that we clamor for are become romantic. They were relevant, they were correct, they were needed, they were done many hundred years ago. What about now? And so on. So we have to be honest to the present situation we are living in. And this takes us even quicker to the global scene and the universality and so on. Ultimately, if you are tapping in all the time to the infinitude of your own soul, then you are able to be a correct judge of a situation in the outer. The biggest suffering we have as human beings now, we do not judge the situation properly, because we cannot go to this timelessness and come back to the moment in time. then it is correct. You've judged it at that time. You were under pressure. You were about to be killed, whatever. So you did what you did. It doesn't mean that what you did is applicable for the next 10 years. It was very local. It was desperate because we are all obsessed with life. So you were only preserving life for a minute. Once you have been released, then you say, no, look here. I never condoned anything they did, but had no options because I am obsessed with preserving life. Every living creature is obsessed with that. We are obsessed with God. So that's it. We have to accept it, admit it, and enjoy it, and and be open, and be with friends and others who are on the same waveband. That's all. And then you have the best of life here, and better after you leave your body.
Wow. So, Sheikh, this very profound thought that you shared about uh, us limiting our understanding to a past which was highly contextual, relating to events that happened, and hence many aspects of the message related to that context, and may not in the exact form and shape be applicable today. And so, how are people able to discern the difference between the locality or the localization and the contextualization of 1400 years ago to the universality and the infinitude of life? I think that's the challenge that people struggle with.
Much depends on faith and trust in the Quran, and much depends on your humbleness in approaching the Quran.
Allah.
Really, if you're truly humble and if you truly believe that this was real and the Quran reflects the absolute, in other words, it's useful, applicable at all times for every being, then you will get it. Otherwise, if you approach it with the usual skeptical mind that we are trained to be nowadays because of our education, then of course it won't reveal itself. It becomes kitabin maknoon. It is sealed. You won't get it.
Wow, wow,
You
wow.
must really lose yourself in order to be able to hear the, if you like, the sound of the divine. So you have to be nothing until it reveals itself. Otherwise, it becomes so many Westerners who loved the Prophet, admired the Prophet, wrote about him and the qualities of this being. They found the Quran incomprehensible, and they often criticized it. So the approach must be right. You have to begin with utter faith. And then it reveals itself.
Thank you, Shekhna. Shekhna, last question. I know we've taken up a lot of your time, and this is about something you just mentioned a little earlier about death. And we're so obsessed with being alive and scared of death. But you say that death, life and death are two sides of the same coin of existence. And the root of each is drawing nourishment from the other. For the people on the path, the Sufis, any reduction in sensual appreciation is often accompanied by increase in inner delights, and that the annihilation to a Sufi while still alive signals awakening and rebirth into the zone of everlasting essence. You always say, die before you die. So help us understand that why are we so scared of death?
To begin with, a child is scared of death as a big, big gift of nature or a gift of the soul itself to preserve this being, to preserve life within the body. Otherwise, a 2-year-old child, intelligent one, wants to fly. He sees the bird, why am I not a bird? So it will jump from, 20-floor high rise. So fear is necessary in order to preserve life in the body earlier on. Later on, fear brings about boundaries and barriers between the physical, visible, meaning, metaphor, and all. Slowly by slowly, that fear will end up into not just hope, into realizing the eternal presence of the light of life in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs practice. It needs a lot of meditation, a lot of silence, and then you find life, 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 alive. Everywhere you look is life, which is, the Quran says, wherever you turn is the manifestation or the face of God. Life, life, life. So you lose the earlier assumption of being my life. Earlier was my life. You kick and you kill, my life. Look at the animals. The cat that defends its tiny kittens by, being fierce.
Mm.
When the kittens are 1 or 2 years old, also try kick them out, bite their head. So it is the attachment and the experience of life that will draw us more and more and more and more and more into cosmic life itself. So it is in a way childish and false when I say my life, my life. Eventually it ends up life, life, life. And my life is not separate from life, life, life. Therefore, I know now that my life not separate from life, which is eternal. So what is the fear? It's a relief. It's the entry to another zone of consciousness when the body is no longer there, mind is no longer there, the encumbrances are no longer there. Then I am truly نفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية. Then أدخلي في عبادي. Enter into the true state of worship, of non-separation and total, utter, perfect obsession. That's it. That's why we are here on earth. Not to accumulate more or this theory or that theory. Well, those may be helpful. They are distractions. At the end, you want to be beyond the mind, beyond the body. That is why drug addiction is going to be more and more desirable. They want to lose the nafs. So do it. Just lose the nafs. Stop it.
And Sheikh, again, as you said, it really is about belief, because I think we fear death because where there is no tawakkul, there is no belief, and hence we fear the unknown. But if there is tawakkul, and if there is belief, and if the Quran has unveiled to us itself, then there should not be any fear, because all I know is I'm just transitioning from a very inferior base state to an extremely sublime, profound state.
Well, I can only talk about myself. I still have fear, but
Okay.
not of death. Fear of pain, agony, because you like tranquility, you like the flow. There will always be a touch of fear. There will always be a touch of hope. And if the two are mixed up, as I said earlier, you end up being anxious and anxiety will increase. But it is minimal fear. It doesn't penetrate, it does not possess you.
Yeah, dominate.
So just a little bit. But it's a memory of the past. So the same thing as the memory of my own ego. I'm grateful to my ego. Earlier on, it caused me a lot of suffering because it burnt me. I wanted to be a king. I wanted to rule. Later on, it became a friend. It says, don't come near me, I'll burn you. So it's the same thing as fear. The same thing. So it is the context which matters. Eventually, you end up knowing that the real you is a divine gift that is so precious beyond measure. And from that gift comes the illusion of the so-called I. And the so-called I will lead you to its origin, which is the real I. And the two are beginning to be more and more in unison. And therefore, you have no more anxiety about things. You know you're hanging on air. You become very flexible and you become very clear. You can't mix up that which is sublime with that which is ridiculous, as we are doing nowadays. It becomes clear to you. And then you can only help those who are ready to be helped at the point that they are. Otherwise, you end up pontificating and more and more and more screaming in mosques or temples or wherever and people run away. So we
But
have to be honest. As for the issue of belief, it doesn't require a religion. The
yeah,
British Empire was based on a belief of the empire, that we are God-sent people to help and guide and civilize and acquire all their wealth and take it back to England and whatever or whatever. So it's based on some model, if you like, that many others follow. And it was always very much rooted in the Roman model, that there has to be, punishment and reward. It is based on that. And once it became weak, and then we began to, everybody had a voice. 200 years ago, most people didn't have a voice. It's minority, not even maybe 2%. Now everybody has a voice, so you can't. No longer anybody will believe in those old ideas of collective this or our mission in life or the white man's burden or empire. No more.
no more.
Now you have to have an individual, personal faith in the inner light. And if there are enough of them, after whatever number of years, then they will trust each other. Because I don't lie for my own sake. It's not for others. I don't want to be confused. I want to be, it's bad enough that I can't recall an event very accurately. One simple event seen by 10 people, they have 10 versions of it. So what about lying on top of that or camouflaging it? It's impossible. That's why it's impossible where we are. You can't reform it. You can't even talk about it being deformed. It's utter chaos. It's total confusion at every level. So once we see it, then we know that it's a reflection of us. The outer world is the macro of my micro. So it's me. I can't deny it. But I've been fortunate in not being right in the middle of that inferno. That's about all.
And Shekhla, then I'm sorry, I just have one more question because you've raised a big, in this inferno, as you say, is this massive confusion. How does a person find a seeker, a seeker find a genuine teacher, a genuine master? Because as you say in the book, that in this age of personal responsibility, which you just stated earlier, rather than the dependency and blame of others, the traditional concept of putting yourself completely into the hand of the master, fana fil sheikh, annihilation through the sheikh, can easily become cultish and create an expectancy that can backfire with negative implications. So if you say that for the teacher, the pupil, if you say that, then how does one seek the genuine teacher and avoid this phenomena of cultish behavior?
It is no longer a continuation of good habits and heritages that were in the past. Those, if you like, silsilas or those paths are no longer valid.
Okay.
They were most valid and necessary few generations ago. Now there is another system. You have to enter into your own inner silence, quietude, pleading, crying, whatever, and then maintain it. Then it comes to you from where you didn't expect. There will be people who teaches you, but it's unlikely to find one master who can give the whole package to you. Somebody may teach you something to do with your, outer character. Somebody can teach you with an outer skill. Somebody can teach you improved relationships, to respect the other people, and don't just be bombastic with and so on and so on. So that you may be helped by numerous teachers, including a bug or a sparrow or whatever. But so the time is very different. No longer this fana fi shaykh also is valid. It's no longer. It's now, instead of it being horizontal, it becomes vertical. You have to enter into the higher zone of your own conscience through silence, through true willingness to give up that which is not yours. The amazing human being, fantastic miracle of mechanisms. How did you invent them? Thousands upon thousands of different organs and faculties connect with each other. You have to be able to enter into that silence of that magnificence, and it will come to you in its own time. You will find people will come to you, not because you're looking for a sheikh. No. In my own case, for example, I found many a time the sheikh was looking for me, or somebody else. Just like that. There's no longer the seeker and the sought can exchange, if you like, roles in a way. You have to be honest and honest and honest and trust in what comes to you, and then read it.
MashaAllah. Sheikhna, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Very kind of you. There is so much more that there is need to ask. I do want to, at a later conversation, have a conversation with you and seek your insights on this gentleman called Yuval Noah Harari, who has written these books about, he's an agnostic and atheist, and he's talking about the evolution of the human being into a super cyborg with artificial intelligence all. And I want to see that in the context of the evolution of the Homo sapien into something Homo sapien plus plus. But we'll leave that for the next conversation.
No, all of that is within the realm of the mental creativity and projections. You said earlier on, you mentioned the word, the other side of the entire thing, which dominates, which is the quantum field. So there are a lot of people who are helpful in giving us understanding of big history and all of that. But what concerns you, and what I hope others also, is the quantum side, where there is no longer reason, logic, or the issue of space and time. That is what is going to be more important. We need to tap into that zone, beyond all of this. You see.
So that will be, inshallah, our next conversation.
Good luck in silence.
In silence. Sheikhna, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.